Let's move to Sunday. Let's move to what I think is actually the most interesting game of the weekend, and that's Stuttgart against Frankfurt. And we've talked a lot about these both teams for different reasons. Frankfurt, have been excellent this year. The story of Omar Marmoush has captured the headlines. I wrote a newsletter about him that Bayern Munich are now very much interested in him, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Whether they can get it done is a different question. Liverpool is another team, right, that really want Omar Marmoush. And I think it was last week where we spoke about the fact, that Marmoush is he's not the same player as Mo Salah, the stats that I have in my article underline this, but he has the potential to fill that void at Liverpool. So they're obviously after him at Bayern Munich. I think he'd be a perfect fit there. He can play in and around Harry Kane and on all that sort of thing. So he's a huge story. Hugo Ekitike is a big story. Frankfurt, it feels like I'm very much in the position that the team was that they're playing this weekend, Stuttgart, right? We were this team on the rise at this point last year. I think still Stuttgart is one of the most exciting teams in German football to watch, but rightfully so. They're also, it's very apparent now that they're in a little bit of a transition. The defense has been an issue. Sebastian Hoeneß is patching over all sorts of things because his players are in high demand. Not only do they play a lot of games for his club, they also play a lot of team games for Germany, right? So that is a big thing that Sebastian Hoeneß has to juggle, and it's noticeable. Some games that they're really great. There's some games that they're really terrible. The Champions League, the back-to-back against Italian clubs, I think, really nicely illustrates. Fantastic against Juve. You watched Atalanta yesterday. Not so great against Atalanta. It's a really up and down roller coaster for them. So with all that said, I think this Frankfurt against Stuttgart game is going to be absolutely fascinating for all of these different storylines. But I also think it is a real clash of different playing cultures. You have Sebastian Hoeneß on the one hand, who really likes to play the triangles on the field, loves to have possession. And then you have Dino Topmöller, who likes what the German call Umschaltspiel, Gegenpressing, right? Like the quick attacks of using Marmoush, using Hugo Ekitike, using the speed. This is going to be utterly fascinating to watch, Stefan.
Yeah, it's going to be a great game for a Sunday. I think two teams who will probably really go into this game looking to pick up something from the match. I think there's kind of two huge factors here that's worth bearing in mind as to how this game might go. I think on the one hand, excuse me, you have a Stuttgart team who, from what I saw against Atalanta, and it's worth pointing out that even though they lost to Atalanta, it's probably really good prep for how they play against Frankfurt, who, are also a very kind of intense team with really good players up front. Lookman's obviously very similar to your likes of Marmoush's or your Hugo Ekitike, very fast player, very direct player, likes to take on defenders, likes to try and beat a high line. So that in itself is probably good preparation for Stuttgart. But as I kind of mentioned in our chat at the time when I was watching the game, and something that I've definitely noticed through much of this season is that, and I actually mentioned in my newsletter this week, which I did on Angelo Stiller and how well he's doing at Stuttgart and how this season's very important one for him because, they've got this kind of midfield of Stiller and Karazor, who are both two very good, dependable players, but more or less everywhere else around the pitch, there's been a lot of turmoil. They lost both central defenders, or both first-choice central defenders. They lost their main man, Sergio Guirassy, up front. They're making changes in both ends. Obviously, Touré's been kind of the chosen number 9 as it is for now. He's very raw. We talked about that on the reaction show to the Champions League games. And obviously in defence, Hoeneß and Stuttgart have just brought in a whole kind of host of central defenders. And in particular, Anthony Rouault and Henri Chase, the two kind of young central defenders who were playing in midweek. It remains to be seen whether obviously Chabot comes in against Frankfurt. But either way, they are two central defenders or three or whatever, defensive line in general, which I think has been kind of pulled apart at times, has kind of showed its naivety, its youthfulness, its inexperience. Rouault, for example, more or less gave away the second goal against Atalanta last night, on Wednesday night. And it just looked like inexperience, really, more than anything else. And obviously, that's something that Frankfurt will look to capitalise on. Obviously, Frankfurt are this team who just cannot stop scoring goals. They absolutely thrashed Bochum. I see you keep looking over your shoulder at the Frankfurt game. Is there anything you want to say? Have they scored yet,
No,
for
it's
example?
still 0-0.
Still 0-0. Okay. I can't use that as my argument. So, yeah, they obviously will go into this game with high hopes of trying to break down and make the most of that, or take advantage, rather, of that young defence. But on the flip side, Frankfurt's away form has not been great this season. It's really worth pointing that out. You take a look at the last 2 away games. They drew 1-1 with Union Berlin, an Union Berlin side who have really praised themselves for being defensive first and counter-attacking, and they really frustrated Frankfurt with that 1-1 draw. Prior to that, they lost 2-1 to Leverkusen in a game that I think a lot of us thought Frankfurt would show up and upset Leverkusen, but Leverkusen ended up winning that game. And at the start of the season, they went to Dortmund and lost 2-0 there, which felt like a real kind of outlier considering how well Frankfurt started the season. So you look at the teams that they've beaten on the road so far this season, the Bundesliga, it's just Wolfsburg with a very slender 2-1 win, hosting Kiel with 4-2 win, who have obviously been pretty poor so far this season. And aside from that, they've actually really struggled against decent teams in the Bundesliga on the road. So I think it'd be really interesting to see how they do against Stuttgart, because on the one hand, Stuttgart are definitely there to be got at, but on the other hand, Frankfurt do seem to struggle on the road against decent sides. So it's a toss-up.
Yeah, no, I think it is. And I think it's also worth mentioning why I think the home form has been so good for Frankfurt is the Deutsche Bank Park is an incredibly difficult place to play at for visiting teams, right? That atmosphere in Frankfurt, I'm not even sure it's called still Deutsche Bank Park, so if I got that wrong, let's just call it Waldstadion. Is the term that it used to have. It is a really incredibly difficult place to go and play football. It's very loud, it's very intimidating. Frankfurt have some of the most intimidating and, in my opinion, best fans in German football. And I said this many times before, I personally think it's the best atmosphere in German football of the bigger teams. I also, think that on the flip side of all of that, Stuttgart's atmosphere in recent years has dramatically improved. That new stadium, makes the things a lot more difficult as well. I think the stadium renovations that they have done in Stuttgart are remarkable. It's a really nice stadium, big stadium with over 60,000 seats now, right? So this is not an easy place to go, and I think that could be a factor. And I think too, I'm just too also really fascinated about the dynamics that we're going to see here, because both teams played midweek. Frankfurt a little bit later. As we are talking, they're drawing Slavia Prague 0-0. Yeah, still 0-0. And it's not looking easy. So, what is that going to mean for the game on the weekend when both these teams are kind of going back to recover? And mind you, there's an international break, 2 weeks. I think a bunch of Stuttgart players once again got called up, right, to the national team. So that is something to keep in mind as well. So yeah, I think this is gonna have a lot of dynamics going on, Stefan.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And it'll be fascinating to kind of see how it plays out. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we actually talked about this, about the Champions League games in particular in midweek, about how they have had a huge impact on the fitness of certain players. I think one to keep an eye on would be Dennis Undav, who went off injured against Atalanta, and it wasn't it may have been a precautionary thing. I'll quickly check.
He is in the Germany squad.
Okay, well, when did Germany play though?
Yeah, exactly. They have another week.
So yeah, it's so it's quite a while away.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a serious injury, but he did walk off and he did look quite frustrated. I've just pulled up let me just do this in real time as we are.
So Kicker is projecting him to play.
Yeah, it looks like he's got the all clear. That's fine. I just wanted to double check. I should have done that before we started recording.
Labeling out though. Labeling is out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and it's going to be tricky for them. And it feels like this season in particular, with this kind of this new kind of format in Europe, is really about these clubs picking their battles, trying to really kind of limit the game time a lot of these guys get. And we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. I'm tempted to go with Frankfurt, but that's only because, as I joked in the subscriber chat last night, I've watched the last 3 or 4 times I've watched Stuttgart. They've been absolutely dreadful. I can't remember the last time I've seen them win a football game, to be honest with you. So if Frankfurt fans want to put together a kitty to pay me to watch this game, so to make sure their team win, I'm all ears. They can run it. They can do a fundraiser or a Patreon or something and pay me to watch this match so they win the match. I'm all ears. But yeah, well, it's like I said, it's a toss up. It's a really tight game, but I think it's going to be a fascinating one to watch on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely.